participate in the discussions. I hope that everyone thought it was. I mean, I hope that everyone found it to be a really good discussion and check in with the broader community. So in the months since then, our consultants have been working on recommendations to update the task force framework plans with input now from all the work that has been done to date, and all that work is being considered as we move forward into the next phase with the task force of updating the comprehensive plan. So you'll see tomorrow we are expecting to have copies of the information that you'll be seeing tonight and to distribute to the task force members for review of some of the draft information that the consultants have provided. And then we're looking at late March or early April for another task force meeting to discuss concepts that are being built off the frameworks that you'll be seeing tonight. And we're hoping that in late April or early May at the latest, we'll be working to finalize the concepts and planning recommendations with the task force so we can prepare for the next community workshop where those concepts will be revealed to the community. So again, this is a really exciting part of the process that we're getting into. So taking a look at the other timeline for the study that you're more used to seeing, you'll see that with this phase, again, we're working to develop a set of concepts and recommendations that'll go to the broader community in the spring. So next, we wanted to get into some of the information that is in the current comp plan. We wanted to, so you'll remember that I sent out some information for the Lorton South Route 1 community planning sector. And at the previous meeting, we went over the comprehensive plan goals for general goals and guidelines for goals and guidance for the Lower Potomac Planning District, and also this special planning area that again is a suburban center known as the LP2 Lorton South Route 1 community planning sector. So this next map on the left shows land unit E, which is one of several land units within the LP2 sector, and it's in this land unit is further separated into 12 distinct subunits. So the aerial image on the right shows the focus area of the Lorton Vision and Study outlined in red, and it's overlaid onto land unit E, and that's where the planning guidance for most of the property that the task force is honed in on for the focus area is situated. And this includes the 3 opportunity sites of Gunston Plaza Shopping Center, which is subunit E5. Subunit E7 is comprised of the entire area that was planned for development as the Lorton Station Town Center. And then subunit E8 encompasses Lorton Marketplace and several adjacent properties, including the site of the Panera that Nick was just talking about. So here we want to take a look at the land use patterns, and you can see how much of land unit E is developed in the orange and then darker orange or brown color, which are shaded to signify how much of the how much of the area is developed with varying ranges of residential density, and it's most commonly in the lighter orange area, which is seen as low range to mid range residential density. And this again largely defines the suburban center of the Lorton South Route 1 community planning sector. And you'll see the larger green tracks near the along the western side and going up to the north side are various types of open space to serve purposes such as outlined in the environmental quality corridor and RPA areas along Pohick Creek. And then you also see some private open space that are tied to some of the subdivisions to the north and east of this on this map. And then down near the bottom is the buffer area between the adjoining uses, the uses that adjoin the Noman Coal Pollution Treatment Center. So as we've discussed in the past, one of the key considerations in understanding how the task force began to form the scope of the study area was looking at the existing conditions of these areas in the large existing residential areas, and then also the open space combined. So that kind of gives an idea of what's going on in the red areas and also the purple areas, where the red areas are commercial and mixed use centers, and the areas that are shaded purple are public uses and facilities such as that include transit facilities. So the Board of Supervisors authorized the study to evaluate potential changes to the comprehensive plan with regard for several factors that include land use, intensities, multimodal transportation infrastructure, open space features, parks, recreational areas, environmental corridors, along with other infrastructure, amenities, and public facilities. The board also directed the study to emphasize linkages with the greater Lorton area and to examine ways for existing and potential future assets to complement one another and help build the community's identity through an improved sense of place, and by fostering support of development of a range of land uses that inspire, complement one another without creating a level of competition that is to the detriment of any of those uses. So one of the first and most memorable comments that I remember hearing while I was taking notes at the community meeting, at the community workshop last month, was when a participant asked the other members of her panel if Lorton is still just considered to be the prison. And then with enthusiasm, one of her fellow attendees answered, "Not anymore." Just like the level of detail that's currently provided for the Lorton South Route 1 sector, the map on the left only provides a layout of the various land units that form the Laurel Hill Community Planning sector. However, the next two maps are also taken from the adopted comprehensive plan. And the first one shows conditions that existed when Laurel Hill was being planned, when the Laurel Hill plan amendment was being studied. And then the next provides a framework of the adopted goals for adaptive reuse, redevelopment, and infill development across the sites that formerly contained the Lorton Penitentiary. So if you, as you're looking at these maps, you can see how the groundwork was set with these frameworks for making that answer no, that Lorton really is no longer the prison. And currently, the Lorton South Route 1 sector doesn't even, the Lorton South Route 1 sector where the focus area is located doesn't even have the level of detail that's shown in these in the two exhibits that are on the right. So before Cecily shows updated frameworks tonight, we first wanted to share a few other examples for ways that the planning guidance is being visualized with updates to the comprehensive plan in other areas throughout the county. At the top left, we can see a presentation slide that was used to help capture the task force and community's vision for pedestrian access to the West Falls Church metro station. And then dotted lines in the lower image on the left reflect the current comprehensive plan's guidance for a potential alignment of pedestrian and bike access throughout the site and into the metro station as adopted by the Board of Supervisors last July. And you can see you can see that these two, the two maps at the bottom are closely based on the visioning that took place with that task force, within that task force, and in communities' visioning efforts. So then on the image to the right on the bottom, we see adopted recommendations for an urban design framework consisting of a variety of building types, open space, and park amenities, along with a sequence of wayfinding nodes and focal points that are intended as placemaking features to help establish a distinct and welcoming identity for everyone who will live, work, play, and visit within the West Falls Church Transit Station area. So here's a look at the Hybla Valley Gum Springs Community Business Center. And the first two maps we wanted to take a look at are the open space framework and then another concept for features that are called ecological spines and plan to support daily opportunities for relaxation, activity, and recreational activity and enjoyment of the outdoors for residents and visitors to these sites. These spines should, the comprehensive plan says that these spines should offer a variety of seating and opportunities for social action planned respectfully to coincide with the resource protection areas through natural development. This means that any spaces programmed for active or passive recreation should use designs that respect the hydrology of the lands within the ecological spine, the requirements of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance, and also draw upon the theme of valuing the ecology. So last, just wanted to show a couple more concepts of two more ways that various aspects of the comprehensive plan for future development in these areas can be visualized to help set planning goals by helping to guide various aspects of development, including the placement of desired land uses and also setting preferences for building heights, form, and massing. And we chose the two examples in these final slides because it conceptualizes ways that the adopted plan for the Hybla Valley Gum Springs Community Business Center could potentially develop with features that are that would be oriented to support and benefit from the location of BRT stations that are planned along Richmond Highway. And of course, that is very similar to the idea to one of the ideas for Lorton to have BRT stations along the Richmond Highway. Although those the locations of those stations have also not been finalized as far as how they'll be recognized in the comprehensive plan. So with all this in mind, we just wanted you to have some ideas of examples in mind for how comprehensive plan guide is being conceptualized in the adopted plan, and how it could also be conceptualized to work for Lorton. So now I'll be turning it over to Cecily, and she'll be sharing information in the form of a summary from the community workshop, and also start looking at some of the initial drafts that are being made to update the task force's framework plans.
Great, thank you, Steve. And I'll start sharing that Word document first, as Stephen mentioned, and then we'll get into looking at the framework plans. I think you received this document in full, is that correct, Steve, on Friday? I think you're muted.
I'm sorry, I may have forgotten to send these out. I know I sent the adopted comprehensive plan out, but I can't remember. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not sure if I sent it out, but I can send it out to everyone now, so you can all have a copy of it.
Great. I think that would be good, just because I'll hit on some the main points of this, but it's a little bit lengthy to go into. And I'll also be touching back on these when we go through the draft framework plans. I think as you'll remember from breakout room, looked at the full study area and broadly asked people their impressions about the character. I don't think there were very many surprises here in terms of pedestrian and trail connectivity. More connectivity is certainly welcomed. Lots of good assets, but not all connected, especially to some neighborhood community assets such as schools, the senior center, the new library to come along with the community center, and then local parks. And that the connections east-west of 95 are not quite there, right? We've experienced that. You've been telling us about that. And then I think there were some comments about pedestrian connectivity and safety along Richmond Highway and Lorton Road, and specific examples that people brought up about that. In traffic and transportation, mainly people were concerned with the traffic on the roads, especially when 95 backs up. Nothing new to you all here, but just kind of reiterating that that's a broadly held concern. Also, the backup on Lorton Road from the Amtrak station was noted.
Excuse me, Cecily.
Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
I received a request in chat to see if you could zoom in a little on the
absolutely.
text.
Sure. Sorry.
Thanks.
Get to that. I have to move a bar here so I can see that. Okay. Okay. Should help. Okay. And then let me just move one other thing so I'm not blocking it. Okay. So moving on, I think that, related to transportation was some people noted it here, other places, about the lack of access to goods and services from the auto train development. A lot of people noted this was current. Remember, this was current. What is the character of the current standpoint? People did also note their specific ones. So you'll see in here comments from people, and we tried not to, this is a compilation of all notes that were received from the facilitators in each of the breakout rooms. So we didn't try to restate the words. We did, correct any spelling errors and some other, road names. But other than that, you'll see them directly from the facilitators here. I think people were great in helping to identify the different character of the opportunity sites here. So just running through those: Lorton Station, Town Center, the train transportation theme seemed to be the main anchor for that. And then I think people saw Gunston Plaza as the neighborhood center, but I think everyone is looking for those two centers, Lorton Marketplace and Gunston Plaza, to be re-envisioned over time, to either upgrade the retail, intensify, as Steve showed us the other example from Hybla Valley, that with the BRT coming and with the availability of land, that there is an opportunity, which we'll look at in a moment, to expand the uses there and intensify the uses. I think the reiteration of the no center or core. And then people did note the clock tower. I think there were two impressions. It's a great visual marker, but it doesn't relate to anything. You can't access it. And so I think that was, it helps, but it doesn't really tie in with anything substantial, certainly not a core. I think overall our impressions were that stakeholders were very positive and vocal during the conversation. They seem excited, but also noted, echoing, and from the folks that attended from the task force, anxious to see the next stages. So task force principles and priorities. I think mainly, and this would be good for you all to read through in more, in more detail. I think this relates directly to the principles. We asked people to reflect on the principles that were established by the task force. And for the most part, I think people did see them as reflecting what they'd like to see. However, they did come up with a few additional principles they'd like to see: that multimodal transportation, connectivity between areas, bus routes and varying routes. I think a lot was based on transportation. The metro stop is a little bit out of the scope of this study, so an idea launched, but I don't think that's within the 20-year timeframe that I've heard. But I think, if you look back in the detail here, there's probably some expansion of what you put forward, but I don't think there were any big misses. Maybe multimodal would be the one, if it's not captured in there, that might be added. Again, we're going to go through each of the sort of taking what we learned from breakout room 2, which focused on each of the opportunity sites of Lorton Station Town Center, Gunston Plaza, and Lorton Marketplace. But you can see here, as I scroll through, and you'll be able to read, is that I think there's there's still not, there's some debate on which area should be the core, which area should be house the core. And we'll share with you some of our thoughts on reflection on this. But we've heard a lot of feedback from you all, as well as from the county and other stakeholders, about which area should be that core area. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. I think people intuitively see that the Lorton Station Town Center has a lot of parking, not a lot of there. It's a good start, but it doesn't quite have that 24/7 vitality that you would hope to see in a town center that had a vibrant live, work, play. And that's largely due to the lack of residential in the area, although there's residential all around, but not within the center itself. And then some ideas here on just what could be connected. Also a note that people, although they like the idea of the trails going through the area, they're concerned about the environmental impacts. And examples were noted. That was one of the questions that, if you participated, you heard. We asked people to give us some examples of places that they think might be appropriate to each of the opportunity sites. So Potomac Mills, Tyson, McLean, Mosaic District. Some of these surprised us. Tyson's, I wouldn't have imagined being quite the right example for this area, but it might be one aspect of it that they liked. Again, these are quite extensive, so I'm going to go just hit the high points here and then go to Gunston Plaza. I think there were a lot of specific notes here that talked about the access, the frontage, that there's no frontage along Lorton Road came up several times. That some people, I think, again, a mixed bag, and some people did see that the retail serves neighborhood needs. A lot of people liked that the Food Line was there, that the gym, that the Department of Motor Vehicles was there. So there were a lot of shops and services that people go to on a regular basis. Others felt that the retail isn't quite up to par. And certainly the traffic and access were noted quite significantly in this area. And again, I will just point out, there's, if we talk about, which we will talk about in a see quite a three-way split between opinions coming out of workshop 1. I think that decision will come down to balancing access, the market analysis, and the suggestions from the market analysis on demand, but visibility, and then just landmass, what's available. Some of the test fits that we're working on right now help to understand those sites a little bit better, what can be done and what is more difficult. Okay, so again, quite extensive here. Lorton Marketplace. I think, people here, you'll see a lot of about the retail that is good, that isn't good, that they wish walking and biking would be easier activities to undertake in that area. People also noted, again, some of the things I've already mentioned about the clock tower. And then, there were again, some surprises here. I think some people, would like to see other big box retailers show up that we don't think of as necessarily going in this area and fitting some of the vision goals that you all had laid out. So, but it's, it's good to hear some of that from the broader public. And again, I'll just, and then the precedent images, I won't go into those because those are separately recorded. People, as you remember, in breakout room 3, we showed a variety of precedent images based on architectural character, streetscape, parking, amenities and activities, and parks and open spaces, and had reactions to those and good conversations around that. Again, some surprised us. I think what we took away was that there's generally large support for mid-rise development, both in these comments as well as in the preference for precedent images. And I mean, some people even pushed it up to 8 stories, although I wouldn't say that's the majority. I think the majority fell concretely in that 4 to 6 story range as being appropriate for the 3 opportunity sites. So again, Stephen will send this out to everyone. I'll stop sharing that so we can get into the meat of the presentation for this evening. So we will go through some of the draft framework plans, the opportunity site approaches, which will go through each of the opportunity sites again, and then just give you a brief. I think if we're on, we'll roll right into it, although Stephen, you'll remind me if there's something that we should break for after we talk about this content before we give the survey update. Okay, so the framework plans.
Oh, sorry, Cecily, there's a question in the chat.
Okay, sorry,
from Dale. I'm sorry, this is Megan. It says, is it possible that there will not be one core area Rome is built on 7 hills and neighborhoods? Just to maybe point that out for your upcoming presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Megan.
Yep.
And that's a good point. I think, Dale, I'll respond to that just in, I think you're right. These areas, they're distinct. They're separated by too much distance to think of this as one discrete area. I mean, I think in probably more than 20 years, 50 years, it could densify to where this became, more fully connected. I think what we are coming to terms with is that the market demand, it projected about 700 multifamily units. I think it was 800 single family units. And when we look at the multifamily, that equates to 2.5 to 3 buildings of what we are looking here that would help to replace some of the surface parked with structured parking and give enough incentive to developers to replace those 1-story commercial buildings with multi-story. So when you look at those, what we look at as mid-rise multifamily, our firm designs a lot of those. Developers are always looking in the 200 unit is the lower threshold for a building, up to 400 units. So when you do the math, that 700 dwelling units over the next 20 years looks like 2.5 to 3 buildings. Again, there are other catalysts that can happen that aren't foreseen in those projections and demand analysis. However, the threshold for that. So when we look at the 3 areas, we really would like to think about where infill opportunity or redevelopment could happen in all 3 locations, but given the balance of the market demand analysis and other competing areas, it may be more realistic to look at, one area and concentrate efforts and prioritize that over the others, because we have to consider that the demand may not be as robust here. That's not to say, again, that over the course of 20 years that we shouldn't think of there's an ability to do more and that we shouldn't set the vision for those. But in terms of prioritizing where development happens, I think it would be good to incentivize folks to develop where this group and the broad public would like to see the impact, because we need, at least, as you know, at least 2 buildings to start making a change. So where do those 2 first buildings happen? Where does the 3rd and 4th building happen? That might be the multifamily density that we'd like to see come in. I see another about the auto train, agreed on that, not very easy. So what I'd like to walk you through here tonight is a series of plans. So right now you see up on screen just the existing conditions, but we've tried to pull out some of the points of interest, those either landmarks or neighborhood assets in the area of the focus area. And then the 3 opportunity sites are called out in blue. We're overlaying here are some of the existing, again, just existing conditions here, showing the trails, the existing streets, and the shared use paths. We can see that starting in reverse order, the shared use paths, there are fragments, obviously, and we'll look at the plans that those would connect over time. But you can see again some of the trail fragments that we experienced out there as well. So you have a start of the Pohick Creek, but we had talked about the potential of connecting to the Amtrak auto train to the west side of 95, creating Lorton Road as a prominent primary street through the area, and how that character of that could be changed over time. We may not be able to lose lanes, but we can certainly deal with the streetscape along there. So then how do we connect the dots, and how do we tie the connectivity to the existing trail system through this area? And this is one of the main ways, I think, in the Hybla Springs and others that have gone through this planning process ahead of this area, looked at this as an ecological spine. You can think of it that way. That's a new term to us, but it certainly makes a lot of sense. We looked at this as a greenway that ties through the Pohick Creek area, linking kind of in the northwest to southeast and beyond, as we know, to access those other trails that are outside of this area. Looking at completing bicycle and pedestrian connections along Lorton Road to connect to the framework that's already there in a shared use, or the facilities that are already there as a shared use path heading east. Look at ways, and this is a little tricky, I will say, is because of those environmental sensitive lands here, trying to get a trail in and connecting to Amtrak. We also have these spur lines. The auto train, fills up with cars, they back the trains up, and that spur actually comes almost all the way to the creek. So in order to get through and under and over to the station, to make that connectivity that we talked about several times here, of connecting the auto train to Lorton Station or down to Lorton Marketplace, it will be difficult due to not just, as someone noted, the difficulty working with Amtrak and moving around their facilities, but also the limit of the tracks and the topography that runs through here. But I think there is a way, after looking in more detail of this, of coming in under along the creek and connecting through. I think that would be a great connection. And then again, this ties, if we were able to come underneath 95, then that accesses all the trail system to the west as well. There are also, and we'll look at those very localized connections that we can make to get better access from the shopping centers as they exist today to surrounding residential that occurs in all of the locations, all of the opportunity sites. And we'll look at that in a little bit more detail coming up. But this idea of the ecological spine coming through here really helps to knit the areas together and to tie all of the pieces together through this green network. So when we start to look at, again, these are just broad recommendations about what could happen within these areas. As Steve mentioned, we have been looking at some test fits or concept plans. We'll be working through those a little bit more and then share those with you in more detail once we iron out a few things and try a few different other options. We've been looking at those as well. And so how do we bring those, the trail system that I just talked about in through these areas, access the shared use path and continue that, for example, south on Gunston Plaza. Now that is a planned shared use path extension, meaning it's already in the county's system of planned trails to continue. But then we've also added in as a dash line additional facilities that help to knit that system all together and tie them to those opportunity sites. Some of the other things noted here are some gateway signage. So we talked a lot about identity for Lorton, and not just about the identity of each of the areas, which we'll talk about more, but as you come in, whether it's Richmond Highway or off 95, how do you experience or how do you identify Lorton to those visitors coming in? How do you start to set the stage for those identity moments? And one of the ways that we looked at was here, and we showed some precedent examples as the underpass lighting and signage that could happen as you come off of 95 and move east on Lorton Road. And there's certainly an opportunity at the juncture of Richmond Highway and Lorton Road. That could be another beacon that could stand proud and introduce at those two primary gateway locations. And then as we'll look at in more detail in a bit with you is the localized, where can there be gateway thresholds that start to give you that frontage off of Lorton Road. If that's the main road that comes through this area, how do you start to break apart the backs of, for example, Gunston Plaza and put frontage and gateways localized within those? The other piece here is, and Steve mentioned this, is the potential BRT station currently identified here at the intersection of Armistead. One thing that we're exploring is, since that hasn't been nailed down concretely yet, we know that BRT stations and other transit stations work best when they are surrounded by, when those transit riders can be part of the more urbanizing environment. So could that station be moved to be more anchored centrally to Gunston Plaza, for example, so that, as you're waiting for a bus here, that you can grab a coffee or you can sit inside a shop and wait for the bus and use your phone to see what the next arrival is, so that you can be participating in that new environment as well. So here we had showed these at the workshop, again, just pulling out some of the existing conditions. We'll start with Lorton Station, just zooming in here, showing the different facilities. Obviously, this has the VRE station and the bus hub, a lot of lines that come through this area. And we know that, importantly, 7 acres are owned by the county here, including the parking for the VRE station. Again, our takeaways from all of the from the input that was received at the community workshop, as well as from you all, and then from our assessments, are this has good bones, but it's lacking the 24/7 live, work, play environment, as I noted. This is due largely to the lack of what I would say a mid-rise development residential that really puts people there that we find at Mosaic, but we're not finding here yet. So it has the good start of urbanism, but it's a little bit of a fragment, right? It has the threshold with the restaurants and shops in the head house building. Although it's near 95, it does not have direct access. It's a little bit of a circuitous approach. The town center transit character is something we can build off of. There's been, I think, a lot of successful work there, highlighting, for example, the caboose. I don't know what they call it, but we call it Caboose Park here at the side of the head house building. And then, again, people noted these precedents. And what we see is, we know that there are 560 surface parking spaces. And that's a lot on 7 acres. That's a lot of underbuilt potential. But in order to unlock that potential, we would need to replace that surface parking within structured parking. And again, I think the most logical way of doing that is with development and mid-rise development. And that may require some incentives. We know that surface parking is a fraction of the cost of structured parking, you know, relatively at least double, if not triple in some cases. So you know, if development is to happen here, there may need to be incentives to handle that. There can also be parking reductions that could be talked about. Again, some stakeholders supported 8 stories, but generally we found support for mid-rise, looking at 4 to 7 stories, mixed use, largely residential with some added destination restaurants to support rather than cannibalize the existing retail restaurants and offices. Again, we'll talk a little bit about, you know, the prioritization, but in terms of what would be required to fully develop this to the potential that we think is envisioned, it would be mid-rise, and it would be replacing those 560 plus the new development parking within structured parking garages. And I think this was pretty clear and well articulated by people in the sessions that, you know, you can come here, but, you know, one of the restaurants might be busy. There's not really anywhere else to go, or they go there to go to medical appointments. But it really needs to be, you know, to be fully realized, it needs to be a place where you can spend 2 to 3 hours of time. With any development, we always recommend that there is the community benefit of open space. And most appropriate here would be a square, plazas, greens, and that connection to the Pohick Greenway or environmental spine that we just showed you on the larger plan. So when we look at this area, and just in kind of bubble diagram form, there are a couple of things to note here. Is one that, again, with the buildings in gray that are existing, there's a good start to the fabric. The park here, with the gazebo, is a great start. But then you quickly move into this language of just drive aisles within parking lots. One of the good things is these buildings, the medical office buildings, for example, they bad news, good news. They don't really have a face. They're nicely designed buildings, but you really enter the building off the rear side, off the surface parking. And it's a little bit limited of a read along Lorton Station Boulevard. So when we look at these land bays that are left, if we continue the road heading north, which is the drive aisle, but create that as a true street with that greenway along Spine coming up through here, there is the ability to create a complete street within that, and then have a new open space that fronts the VRE station, framed by some retail. Another opportunity would be to fill these sites in with smaller, medical office or other office buildings. However, we know again from the market analysis, the demand within the next 20 years is not going to be high on that, although there is the potential that more professional offices could be built as one-offs. However, then the question becomes about the replacement parking. We don't see it likely that say a 2-story office building would be able to replace that parking as well as handle their own parking. So we do think to really unlock the potential of these areas, you would be looking at mid-rise with structured parking that helps to buffer any residential and retail from the tracks with those garages. Again, having the green connections come through and the street system come through. Okay, moving on to Gunston Plaza. Again, here we can see some of the existing conditions. By far, this is the area that has, just as I mentioned for Lorton Station, it's quite constrained in terms of the available depth of the parcels, whereas Gunston Plaza does have a deeper parcel footprint here. If you look from Richmond Highway to Lorton Road, and that does offer some opportunities for additional blocks, fully lined blocks, et cetera. So our takeaways or approach, again, based on the information that we've been talking about here with the task force and in your principles, as well as the stakeholder input, is that, this is an older shopping center fronting on Richmond Highway. It has no frontage on Lorton Road, large surface parking lots, really within the plaza itself, there really is no street or open space network at all. And there's very limited pedestrian connectivity. Again, it lacks that 24/7 live, work, play environment that we see in those examples that people have noted to us that they'd like to see here. And then it's also, although again, there is some surrounding low density residential, there isn't great great or safe pedestrian access from the nearby residential. This retail does serve neighborhood needs, so it'd be nice if, if redevelopment happened, that there could be some of those uses that could be relocated, so you still are serving the neighborhood within the redevelopment. One thing we learned is the owner of the shopping center and office building is a Texas-based entity, and it's really has been purchased as a leasing asset, although there are plans to give a facelift to the existing center. That's their immediate plan, but they welcome increases to the development potential, but they're somewhat reluctant of themselves to do a redevelopment in the near future. The senior building that's vacant, they noted, has no parking in and of itself. So that would be something to unlock. That site has to be unlocked with Gunston Plaza. Yeah, okay, thank you, Nick. And we'll correct that. It does have 7 spaces, but that's not nearly enough to really handle that. And the plaza owners know that, and that they also mentioned that there was really no formal easement, and there's no grandfathered in agreement for the plaza to afford any further parking. So again, it's not adjacent to 95, but there is a straight connection to via Lorton Road. And with the addition of the frontage along Richmond Highway, this has pretty good access, along with the potential BRT route. And just like the others north of here, I think this could be a great opportunity site, given the depth of the site and all of those access points. Again, to unlock the site's potential, that deep, wide site's potential, you'd need to then replace the surface parking spaces and likely over time in a phased scenario with structured parking, and look at, again, the mid-rise to be the key to afford the replacement of the surface parking into structured parking. And again, this may require incentives to do that. There has to be a way of balancing or at least supplying the trigger to any gap financing that would move from this 1-story, roughly fully leased center to get to a point where development could be enticed to come in. 4 to 7 stories again. And I think this could be this could be the location for a retailtainment, meaning something more like Mosaic that has places where you can, that's a core of dining, of places you could see movies or live entertainment, bowling, those types of retailtainment uses that help to activate a center like this. But it also has to have that balance of residential to help ground those uses, like we find in Mosaic and others. Again, the center is quite old. The office building that you see here to the right has already had a facelift and is not, I don't think even the owners even are looking at that as a potential rebuild. But I think in the end, for the vision that I think everyone here on the call and many supported in the workshop would be ultimately a full rebuild, but that's going to take, incentivizing the owners to move off of their leases and look to potentially either selling or partnering to redevelop. Okay, and as Abby reminds us, she's here on the call today, but residential growth will spur commercial demand. So we need to, if we're going to have retail come in, we need to supply the residential that will help it to be successful. So we don't want to oversupply retail. That just undermines it. It's better to right size the retail, and you need the residential to help focus that and create the demand around it. If this is to be successful, Lorton's core, it needs to create a place destination where we can spend 2 to 3 hours. And again, we need to choose over the next few months of where the focus is going to be. There is controlled redevelopment potential up at Lorton Station, meaning the 7 acres that's owned by the county. But if it really wants to be in Gunston Plaza, then I think we need to really find out the right formula that will create the incentive for it to happen there. Again, we need those neighborhood scale open spaces, squares, plazas, greens. That will be a benefit. It'll also supply some of the residential with open spaces nearby. Oops, sorry. And improve those pedestrian access points. So let's look at that in a little bit more detail, is to have a core. We may expand the central green space, just to note that's one of the things we're looking at currently, to have a real center here surrounded by retail on the ground floor and other residential. We may look at moving again, currently the bus rapid transit station is looked at broadly here. But I think it could be, if we have a successful core here, that it may want to gravitate further north, and that would put it more in the neighborhood of a half mile from the library community center. And that's the spacing that we would advocate for, and that would be more regular along the BRT route. Again, that would put people right in the midst of everything and really activate this place. As I mentioned earlier, this green on the corner really could be a signifier, a place for art coming out of hopefully the workhouse art production. It could be a vertical sculpture or a light beacon that sits proud on this corner, something of what's shown in the Precedent Images here, to really create that beacon and gateway as you come in into Lorton from the east. And then really, think about how streets are formed to create these buffered sidewalks and activated street frontage. And again, looking at that mid-rise development. Oh, odor mitigation. Yeah. So, there is, some concern about the sewage treatment. I think over time, just anecdotally, I don't live there, so I'm not going to say, but I do know that 2 things that we've learned is that the owner of the shopping center has not received any complaints relayed to us for the odor from their existing tenants. And also, I think with residential being here, if it's mid-rise construction, the window quality, potentially it's fixed windows, that helps to mitigate that, so you don't have the smell intruding into your homes. We also think that there is quite a buffer here, and the green spaces would help over time to create a little bit more, as well as the street trees along all of these. So I don't think we can, unless the plant is being further upgraded, I think that's something that is a little bit hard to mitigate further. But I do think that from what we've heard, and from the ability of construction and street trees and other open spaces to help buffer that still could be a successful location. Okay. All right, and then moving on to Lorton Marketplace. This, again, the area here It's a little bit tighter than what we find at Gunston Plaza, meaning from the edge, which comes up along a buffer here to the rear, and Lorton Market Street, which does continue along and would be hard to relocate because of its connection along the residential and then further south. So our takeaways here are, the shopping center, again, fronts on Lorton Market Street, not on Lorton Road. So it's this, how do we create Lorton as the main road coming through the area when there's very little frontage on it now? We really need to, over time, control that frontage. We can do that at Gunston Plaza. We can do that at Lorton Marketplace. We can anchor the gateways and look for other opportunities to strengthen that street character, street trees. But again, this area, it's a shopping center, right? So it's a little bit more recent construction than Gunston Plaza, but it definitely lacks a 24/7 live, work, play environment. There are some more like goat paths that people have created to connect to the residential, but there's no immediate connections to the residential. Again, the large surface parking lots and no street or open space within the area. As I mentioned, the site's shallow with the environmental constraints to the east. Here's where it, an advantage adjacent to 95 with nearly direct access, but it doesn't act as a gateway. It has the lack of frontage along Lorton Road. The clock tower, again, vertical marker. It's certainly that clock tower, you can see it, I'm sure, arriving on the train. But it's not anchored to anything concretely that helps to lock it into Lorton Marketplace. The underpass I mentioned could be an opportunity. Certainly, it reads as a long tunnel. It's somewhat daunting to walk under there, but with light added and signage added, I think that could be a nice gateway feature with the underpass lighting. In the short term, if Gunston Plaza is the priority site, really what you're looking at is some small infill retail opportunities. Potentially this has to come with reduced parking ratios, especially with the Amazon Fresh coming back in. We really need to unlock some of the potential to build out more there by reducing parking ratios. But the full potential is really unlocked again when this moves to a structured parking with mid-rise development, and it could be phased over time, taking away part of the center again over time and creating more mixed use mid-rise and replacing some of the surface. And then there is the opportunity extending past our time frame, but we're happy to take a look at it where even there may be some office or other things that have the adjacency to 95 that could be placed at the threshold of Lorton Road. Certainly 1 to 6 stories are feasible in this area, and maybe the near term is that 1 to 3 story small commercial infill if Gunston Plaza is the focus. But again, it's really understanding that the residential growth is needed to not only fund some of the parking, moving to structured parking, but also to spur that commercial demand. There is an ability, and I'll just talk through it here on this, to create these green connectors that move to the Hagel residential over to the east across the environmental constraint. You can see the stream buffer. And it's actually, the stream buffer actually goes into some of the location where the buildings currently are for the commercial. So that, with I think that might have been an expansion of the stream buffer, certainly would impact further redevelopment of the site, but it's still possible. And then, so these green spines that come through and then connect, again, this is very, pretty much formalizing a path that's already been made near the storage building. But anchoring these main entries with commercial development. And then in the long term, is there a possibility, as Nick was saying, just broke ground on the Panera. So it's a little bit disingenuous to say that within this the realm of this study that would be torn down and rebuilt. But I think if you looked at the longer term, and you would certainly want to capture those 2 corner locations along Lorton Road to make a statement. Maybe those could be mid-rise office buildings over time with ground floor retail that really made signature office building locations there. As I mentioned, the underpass lighting, there are many ways to do that. There are also these linear park ideas where you can include art that acts as playground equipment, as we did down in downtown Columbia. Sorry, I'm going to move this off. Again, creating streets that are tree lined with the new development, creating open space that's, maybe this would be a flexible lawn area that could house either programmed events or just pickup games for the residential. And then eventually, is this an opportunity? Again, maybe it's 20 plus years when Gunston Plaza is built out, but where you'd have, mid-rise development that has active retail on the ground floors fronting those greens over time. And Steve, I'm going to pause there if you let me know if it's good to go into the survey update or if you want to touch on anything else before I do.
Maybe before we go into the survey update, we can see if anyone has questions about the frameworks and the information that was just shared in the concepts.
That was great. That was a lot to absorb. I'm hoping you're going to email this around so everybody can take a look at it. On the Panera, I would just say that, what was around 18 years ago sometimes is not always around today. So something like a Panera might be popular today, might not be in 15 to 18 years. So that industry certainly has a lot of comings and goings.
True.
As well. So you never know.
Absolutely.
So I mean, the one general theme I kind of see is that the residential has to increase and come before the commercial will appear.
Well, I think they can come hand in hand, but I think, as probably Abby can chime in here also, I think it's that formula that has to unlock it, right now. And that's not to say things wouldn't change over the span of 20 years, but right now what we see, what a lot of private developers are coming to us are looking at, well, how can I infill my shopping center where the leasing isn't great, where I have all this surface parking, it's definitely underdeveloped. I now, because of whether it's comp plan changes or zoning changes, I have the ability to densify, but the only way that they can unlock that puzzle is to go at least to, typically it's 5 stories to get to the point where they can justify financially tearing down 1-story retail and building mid-rise to get that structured parking to be able to do that. And the foundation of that, we are looking at a time when the residential demand is higher than commercial demand right now. So again, currently, and I would see, especially in this area in Lorton, with the demands and the employment centers nearby, that demand is not going to diminish, that would be the key to unlocking the potential of these largely surface park sites, is to go mid-rise, include mixed use development with residential as a key component to it, but not the exclusive component.
I see Claudia has a hand up there. Do you have a comment?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Claudia Figueredo and I live in Lorton, actually within the limits of this project. I have not too long time living in Lorton, but I have like more than 15 years living in Fairfax County. And I have a question regarding the redevelopment. What would be the cons for these redevelopments? Because I see they are 20 years. It will be probably demolitions, right? To restart or initiate a new building. Why only that section of the limits has been chosen for this project. I live in between Lorton Station and Lorton Road and Silverbrook by the hospital, and I see there's a lot of open space there where really can be done more or the same projects in a new ground, in a new versus in all in all ground where probably we'll have to invest more time and is already it has already other kind of construction like pipes and things like will have to take more time. Why did not move or initiate that project in an open space where the ground is clean and you can invest that funds or designs to a new in a new area? It is the same. It's just like probably 2 minutes or 1 minute away where you are. Why do not expand a little bit more or move into a new open space like in the Lorton Road? If you keep going in the hospital, what Nova Hospital is, you will see there's a big open space there. Nothing is there. So that is basically my question, because that is what will be the cons for these redevelopments? Because as I said, my concern is those demolitions and those times, it will cause traffic for the people that goes to those stores, to buy their, it is really, there is nothing around where I live. It is really everything is a little far away. And by the side that I am, more shopping centers are needed, at least a grocery store. So that would be basically my question. What would be the cons for the redevelopment of this project on the grounds and having to work with that structures and that lot size? So what would be
Sure, I think to answer some of that, the area that you're talking about that's along Lorton Road north of the Inova, that is areas designated parkland, and you're not able to put kind of commercial entities on it. That was part of the deal that was struck between Fairfax County and the District of Columbia government when they took over the prison area. So this is just a vision. So we're talking about offering a vision to developers in the future. It's up to kind of private industry to make that type of development happen. I think one of the things when we started was, kind of where is the center of Lorton currently? And you have the Lorton Town Center on a smaller scale in the center of Lorton, but there's been a lot of talk and desire for Lorton to have some of those amenities that we currently don't have. And, a lot of people felt we didn't offer enough of a vision to kind of make that to happen, or the comprehensive plan didn't have enough or strong enough language in it to kind of offer that division. Honestly, I think if you ask any developer that's coming into Fairfax County, there's not a lot of actually good, easily available land left that is easily developable without pouring tons of money into it. So most of the applications we get for land development are either difficult land parcels that require a lot of work, or they're, redevelopment of existing uses in there. But the center generally was that the committee had kind of come to determine was the Lorton Road corridor between I-95 and Route 1 down that stretch. And then you're looking at the major parcels that currently exist with Gunston Plaza, the Lorton Town Center, and also Lorton Marketplace down on the lower left there. And to try to connect or have some connectivity between these different parcels that would offer, kind of walkability, a place where residents could gather, from all around the surrounding area to be able to kind of spend that, I'm sure if you frequent one of those places, you might be spending 20 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes, but to kind of create that center where you would be kind of the 2 to 3 hour time frame and be able to kind of, walk around and enjoy, some things that are just not here now. And that's where we kind of focused on that particular area, because there are 3 kind of major shopping centers in there now that have potential for better connectivity, but also the lack of any kind of enough open space that is actually developable. And that's, I think, the key part is there's not a lot that's actually developable. Everything has to be a bit kind of changed. I'll let anybody else chime in if they have any other comments on that.
I would just add that, we look at these areas that have been developed with low rise, often 1-story development and surface parking as the prime opportunity sites anywhere, not just in Lorton, but when we look at, in the mid-Atlantic area or just nationally, that these areas that, they are looked at as great potentials because they're land banks. We look at them as, they were the sites that are relatively flat, that have low-rise development, and oftentimes that is met its lifespan. So then you start to think, okay, what is the next step? And the next step is not just to rebuild 1-story retail centers, but to look at, ways in which we can create those 24/7 live, work, play environments that people are lacking and desiring in their communities. And often these older shopping centers with surface parking are land banks and potentials for that.
Thank you for speaking up, Claudia. This is a visioning process that's been going on for a while, but we're always looking for great ideas and, things that we might not be thinking of. So appreciate your comments.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, that was my concern, because I also almost live in the intersection of Lorton Road and all the 95 interstate, and where the hospital is, and I can see that kind of difficult also to get out, and was wondering what happened with that open space there. That was my concern, and that was I brought that up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think along with this, and we have people on the call here from transportation. That definitely is part of this. It's not all just redevelopment and development, but we're going to have to look at transportation improvement possibilities as well. It's already a bit of an issue without developing further. Dale, did I see your hand up? Or your face showed up?
Yes, actually, I turned it on. I thank you, Claudia, for your comments, because I'm intrigued as well. But to the point, Nick, you just brought up about having transportation on here. I participated in Delegate Transportation workshop last week with VDOT, FCDOT, mostly VDOT, and talking about the future of things. And one of the ideas that has always been floated as long as I've been around is right next to the map, right between Lorton Inova Healthplex and that's the old Lorton Elementary School. And that's right now a transportation center of the county, because the building was surplus. When they built Lorton Station across on the other side of 95, they got complete of the Lorton Elementary. We asked the transurban people specifically about the ability to add an entrance onto 95 South for us to be able to try to avoid having to go all the way back up to Fairfax County Parkway, or to further clog Opitz Boulevard all the way down on the other side of Woodbridge. And that was just completely rebuffed. I would say the difference between that and a 99% chance not happening is the 1% chance of it would also not happen. I mean, it was just not there. So now the question begins, and I think what I hear Claudia saying is if some of those things are going to get chiseled into much harder jello on transportation, that we aren't hearing or seeing any other planning, there's nothing else being discussed about it, is areas like that, are areas like that able to be looked for development as well, just immediately off of the clock tower area, which is what, 300 yards. So that might be something to think. And then lastly, this is really out of the box, and it's probably because I've been doing a lot of work in the schools recently. Would there be any calculus, any gravity in looking at the Lorton Station Elementary School site, which is huge? That is a huge site adjacent to the walking path area. And I do like the Ecological Spine, the Greenway, trading that off with where the Gunston Plaza is. In other words, rebuilding the elementary school on that site, adding development around it, and then taking the school site and developing that as a potential commercial center and or residential site with more density. I'm not saying that the school system hasn't done some different things before, but I was involved in the project where they took the 5-story dentist office for Bailey Elementary, and the Bailey's upper elementary grades 3 through 6 ended up in that dental building when it was renovated over a period of a year. So I think they do look at unique possibilities, or would be willing to. It would depend on the incentive along that. But I just wanted to throw on the table, because as we're looking to try to link land availability that is possible, and then link density in order to support several of the things we're talking about. Exactly, sir, exactly. Looking at some of those and seeing if whether or not some of that can happen in a very different process than just, because what alarms me is I've heard it about tonight that it would be phased in over a period of time. So it's not 2040, it's really Lorton 2045, 55. And that's pretty far out there as far as expecting any of the local trying to get a vision on where that would be. So just, I know it's a little rambling, but when I look at that map, when you look at a bird's eye view of the map like this, you do begin thinking about and what's currently there, and then asking the question, does it have to be there? Thank you.
Mr. Sargent. Tim Sargent.
Thank you, sir. I'm just trying to reconnect here. Questions for Cecily, I think, and based on some of the conversation, what is the, we're talking a 20-year time frame, and that's not uncommon. So, you're going to need time built in to develop too. But within a couple of thoughts, and something I've raised before, and that's the issue of all the cut through traffic that divides this community now. Within that 20-year time frame for policy language, perhaps policy plan language, or within the area plans discussion for this, what do you think of including the issue, and it gets to Dale's participation on this transportation group, of making at least an ideological goal of reducing the amount of cut-through traffic that divides these significant sections of Lorton. Obviously, it's going to take a while, but it's a significant problem that makes connectivity through one Lorton, especially during morning and afternoon hours, kind of difficult, and it discourages that that destination goal. Is that possible? What do you think?
So, I'm curious. I mean, people are asking good questions. I don't want to, also just not address the other question that we had or the other thought that was broached on looking at this area. But to answer your question, I think you are looking at, when you say, kind of dissuade or try to cut through traffic to stop coming through here. I think the key then is to offer alternatives, right? So the BRT is certainly an alternative that is proactive or incentivizing, get some people out of their cars and offer them a different solution that works. A BRT elevates transit and helps to make that feasible for people. I rode transit for 17 years, and I know the pluses and minuses of that. And giving priority to buses definitely helps it become more of an option. Having frequency, having duration of time schedules that make it more feasible to use as a daily commuting choice, that would be an alternative. Certainly, there are probably other broader connections that could be made that would allow people to use alternative routes so they don't need to cut through. I'm not a big proponent of the Beltway scenario. I come from the land of Beltways, around Baltimore, and as one futurist said, trying to decrease traffic congestion by adding lanes is like trying to cure obesity by loosening your belt. It doesn't quite work. The real solution to that is to increase connectivity, is to make it easier for people to find alternative routes because there are more options available. So that may mean, an end to future development with cul-de-sacs. I would say that should be almost outlawed at this point in our existence. I know some people on this call might love cul-de-sacs, but I would say that they are a detriment to creating a great network of streets that allows for alternative pathways. It also puts a lot of pressure on our collectors and our highway systems because they have to take, especially the collectors, those streets like Lorton Road that really shouldn't have to serve everybody collecting in one neighborhood or area has to use that road. If there are connections between neighborhoods, that allows people to not overload Lorton Road, for example. So I think that is a broader conversation, certainly one that we would love to encourage and have. And I think we start out the process saying, okay, where else can we connect these streets? Because that, to me, ultimately is the solution to not overburdening Lorton Road. Sorry, I could go on and on about that.
But I think that kind of highlights, as we look at a 20-year vision and window here, some of the things that have to be done to give Lorton its breadth to develop. Mm-hmm. And traffic is certainly one of those things. Getting back to Dale's point about that development scenario he discussed, one thing that strikes me with Lorton in its three parts is that you almost want to create a destination of some sort that's different from the other two parts in each section, so that you have a reason to go after you've gone to the wonderful new restaurant down in the main Lorton Market Street area. You want to go over to the area where currently the new grocery store is, but has something else there. Right. Maybe that includes some kind of town center or entertainment. So as we look at the big picture, and I think Dale's example is good. Let's look at how we are connecting these three sites by making them mini destinations. I don't want to call them mini, but all having destinations in there so that the whole area is attractive. And I do think cut through traffic that we face from 95 especially is a huge, huge problem and detriment to the future growth of this site. So I see if we can be bold enough to include some of these visions for the future, they become more than just aspirations or wishful thinking. We may be able to provide the goals that set the direction as our elected officials talk about transportation improvements along, on either side of 95. I agree with you on cul-de-sacs. That's a good point. That's something we should include too, probably. That's it. Thanks.
Claudia, did you have another comment?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, and that was also one of my concerns, because I think the access that we can have, or an alternate access that we can have besides just driving. Why not build a bridge structure and a bike trail that can be connected maybe to an existing road, or maybe a 2 lanes configuration bike trail, to be able to go or walk or ride a bike in maybe in the spring or summer season, when or just simply walking, because it, as I said, is difficult sometimes to go. We are very close. I'm very close to Lorton Road, but it's difficult to get there because of traffic, and because the intersection, you have cars, vehicles coming in all directions. So it is difficult to get out, and even when you're driving. But if you don't have a transportation, we still have to have a way to get there, and walking, if it is possible, maybe in the spring or summer, and do or construct those bridges and structures, and bike trails to, as I said, maybe a 2 lanes or something that we can be connected to an existing road, to help to help us to get to those close shopping centers, like by the clock tower. That is very close to me, but it's difficult to
Right.
get. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Tim Reiser?
Sorry about that. My question is relative to the sites that we've selected. These are the pieces that the committee selected, 3 main sites from the collective group. We base the other sites that we should focus in on, other than the ones that we've selected or identified.
Sorry, I think the last part of it cut off. You're talking about the...
My question is whether or not we selected and identified 3 main sites. But for the contractor that's coming in and taking a look at the area, do they recommend or suggest that we look at any other sites besides the 3 we identified?
I can just say that we had started to look at the site here north of Lorton Road. It is actually out of the RPA and some of the other environmental constraints. It does have a drainage, that would be the one constraint or limitation. There are also some utility lines that come through in this area. I believe it's water and sewer. And Steve, I know you did a lot of the research here. There is that drainage constraint. Do you want to give the update on that, and that it would be an area we can also look at, but there's probably a boundary at which coming up, we had not, I will say, just to answer the previous question, we had not looked at taking out the Lorton Elementary School as a possibility. So
But
With
all the sites have some constraints. Some,
Absolutely.
you know, so
Yep.
so I hate to take too many things off the plate, as it
Right.
were, at the early stages of this. So I just,
Yeah, when was the school built? I don't, because we didn't look at that. I don't know when the date of that is. Anybody know?
probably in the 50s.
Okay, so it's not a
What
new building.
element? The Lorton
Lorton
Elementary?
Lorton Station was built in like 93 or 94, 92, 93 in there. Lorton
think we're-
Elementary the Lorton Elementary over next to the Lorton Healthplex was built in like 50 or 45. But Lorton Station Elementary has only been around since like I want to say 91, 92.
Yeah, okay, right. So, I mean, that was probably a significant investment, but in any event, there are probably some other constraints here that we need to be mindful of. Steve, could you give the update on the drainage constraint?
Yeah, to help get an answer for this question, I actually reached out to Katie Herman, who is a planner in our planning division's environment and development review branch, and one of the points that she made, and we all heard from Katie Torgerson as well, though, was that that this site has let's see, this site has problematic soils. That part of the reason why it's considered to be a environmentally sensitive drainage area is because of issues with the soils that are located there. And I think they'd also taken a look at the maps, the aerial maps, and saw that the site had not been. This is one of the few sites that hasn't been touched since the 1930s. So that tree of stand, that stand of trees has been there intact since the 1930s. And even though it's not in the floodplain, I think it's my understanding that because of the drainage issues, that's really one of the issues with drainage is really one of the main reasons why why it hasn't been developed up to this point, and may not may not be suitable for development, at least of buildings still. So
There were, to Tim's point, there are some other areas, some pockets around the area that are probably, we need to kind of look at, besides just the three large areas. If you look down at like Lorton Road there, where it says Lorton Road, there's some single family homes that go all the way down that corridor that probably in the big scheme of things would be appropriate to leave them as one residential unit per lot, if the surrounding area is going to be much higher density.
Nick, some of those are, just to note, you can see the blue line here along Pohick Creek. Some of those are now within the floodplain. They're about 3 lots to about 3 or 4 to the west of Pohick Creek floodplain, and then these others, 7 or 8 east of it.
I understand that, but I also understand that developers have been given a waiver for that floodplain as well.
I think the development that's taken place was it's my understanding that some of the development that has taken place of the single family homes to the east were done by having surveys that actually identify where the RPA is. But what Cecily is speaking to now is that the FEMA maps are being updated, and the county maps are being updated soon to follow those FEMA maps. And the FEMA maps are actually calling out floodplain on some of those sites where she's shown the floodplain now. So that's a different issue than being able to go in and kind of get a designation for the location of the RPA, because they're finding that some of those properties are actually in what FEMA is now identifying as floodplain.
Sure.
I want to also mention that that the construction of Lorton Road, when it was redone, raised the grade pretty substantially over there and trapped in and created more of a floodplain area, flood issues for that area. And through all that whole side of that project.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It's a lot of impervious surface to add to that roadway.
Yeah, and it was raised up quite a bit. And so it really backfilled in and trapped it. But to some extent, so there's the Noman Coal treatment plant is using and has a water, wastewater going down through that area back there as well, going out, I think, to Covanta. But some of that needs work, I think, in general to preclude the flooding that might otherwise occur that's been created there. But all I'm saying in general is that almost every site we're going to look at has a number of constraints, whether they're economic, whether they're environmental, whether they're just physical land or locations or roads and pieces. And we need to be able to make sure that we keep a fairly open mind with all of it to be able to, for best planning.
Agreed.
With that note, I think Cecily had Nick, you can check to see if there are other questions, but I was also going to offer that this information will be sent out to the task force with a request to provide comments and updates and ideas for comments for updates or ideas or recommendations or anything else that you all would like us to look to take a look into from as far as staff and also the consultant. So I just wanted to keep that note that you'll have more time to look at it over the course of the coming week, and all these questions and more are things that you can provide to us for consideration.
Great. Yeah, we have to be cognizant of time. It's 8:15, so let's keep going.
Okay, I just, if this is the time, Steve, I'll just give a quick update on the survey. I'm getting a nod, so I'll go ahead with that. So as you know, and we met with you before, well, as this was launching, it launched January 2nd for the survey. And we did extend the closing date. It was 4 weeks and February 22nd. But we did elect to extend the closing date to March 8th to further allow for outreach and a push to get more participation. So it will be open a full 6 weeks. As of January 24th, the last date that we pulled them, just 4 days ago, we had 224 participants. I will say that 223 participants were English survey respondents and one was Spanish. So I think Steve and others, I know Maite from our office, looked at Latino businesses in the area and sent a list of those that could be, that outreach could be driven to hopefully drive up participation, especially to the Spanish version. So again, encourage everyone to still promote. It is still open, will remain open until March 8th. The two links here, which you can copy out once we send these documents, or you can find it on the project website, which is probably the easiest way, and direct people directly to the project website to access either version of the survey. Oh, and I see Nick has thankfully put those in as well. Thank you, Nick. So you can find those in the chat if you want to do some promotion right now. You can copy those out from Nick's chat link and post those.
How do you see that playing out? How clear is that end game policymakers to you?
Okay. Thanks, Cecily. So I don't know if you wanted to see if there were any closing questions or anything, Nick, or if you just wanted to kind of talk about next steps from here.
Yeah, okay, so I mean, I think that's been a lot to absorb. If Steve, you could email around the original documents, those Word documents with the comments, as well as if we can get a copy of Cecily's presentation emailed around. I would encourage everybody to start to gather some thoughts and see if we're missing anything, if we're on the right track. Just really pour through it in detail and get some comments and questions submitted during the next few weeks so that we can continue to move this along.
And as I mentioned earlier, that the comments will be sent out tomorrow. And I'm sorry, the the information will be sent out tomorrow, and we'll be asking the task force to return it to staff for by March 3rd, and staff will also be reviewing them. So everyone with staff who's reviewing the information, we will be consolidating our comments and also consolidating all the task force comments before we hand it back over to Cecily and her team. So they'll get one round of comments from everyone, but all comments will have the name, we'll identify who made those comments and what their roles are in the process.
Immediately jumped on it.
Mr. Reinhardt, you there? Nick Reinhardt? There you go.
Yeah, I'm here.
You're recording this meeting. You'll have the link for the recording.
Yes, once I stop recording, I'll copy and paste the link and send it to all the task force members.
Okay. Yeah, I know there was quite a few that weren't able to make it this evening, and I'm sure they would like to be able to review that.
Yeah,
so that would be great. So yeah, again, I think the next objective is for all of the task force members to kind of pour through all of this and start offering back comments, and that then we'll start to form our next meeting and see what else we can get covered. But I think that was a great start tonight, and a lot to go over. Did anyone else have any comments or questions for this evening?
Next date from here?
Next date.
We have not decided on a final date. I think part of that'll be dependent upon how much time is needed to respond to all the comments. But I think the initial plan was to start looking at the possibility of coming back to the task force on March 28th, if that's enough time for to digest and respond to everything that comes in from all the different angles that'll be coming in for the consultants. So if that's not possible, we'd probably move into early April. And I think that county schools are maybe on spring break the first week in April. So that was one of the things we would probably need to coordinate as well, and we'll talk to Nick about that. But I'm sure there's some members of the task force and also members of staff who may not be available at that time. So if at all possible, we try to keep it in that last week of March. But again, that just depends on the time it takes to make sure that everything is being addressed that comes out in the comments.
Yeah, I think that works. And I would also suggest maybe we try to get everybody's comments in maybe by Friday the 18th as a kind of as a goal for task force members to submit any questions or comments. We
were actually asking for them in a week on on Tuesday, March 8th, by Tuesday, March 8th.
Tuesday, March 8th. Okay. Tuesday, March 8th it is. So if we can email that around with a recording, that information that task force members submit and leave their questions and comments on the material by Tuesday, March 8th.
And if the recording may be too large to send in the email. So what we'll do, we'll have it posted to the website, and we'll send the link to the website for the recording as well.
Yeah, the recording is generally on Zoom itself, so it's just a link to that site.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's generally a few hundred megabytes. It's not emailable. Okay.
All right.
Not seeing any hands up. We will bid everybody a good night, and thank you, Cecily and team, for a great presentation. Thank you, Stephen. And we will hopefully hear from everybody by March 8th.
Great. Thank you all.